Good morning. Hope you're all right today. Another day, another thought. I'm back to thinking about light and darkness and looking at something in the Old Testament that happened. Cast your mind back in your thinking about the Old Testament, right back to the plagues of Egypt. There were, I always count how many there were, but there were a good number of plagues in Egypt. You remember the water turned to blood, the plague of frogs came, then a plague of gnats, and then a plague of flies, then the death of the cattle, then boils and sores, hail and fire, locusts and darkness. This is in Exodus 10, verses 21 to 29. Moses had been sent to Pharaoh to ask him for the release of God's people from slavery in Egypt. And it's the last plague before the worst plague of all, when the firstborn of Egypt all were killed. And the Passover meal was instituted. Each one of these plagues is a miracle. It's an impossible event that happens. And this one is very interesting because when we read it, I'm guilty of this so much that so often we read the scriptures and we just read it without actually thinking about what it would have been actually like to have lived through this particular plague. I think some of the plagues that were sent were absolutely dreadful. We do hear occasionally of locust swarms around the world. And there was one earlier on this year that brought devastation on top of the pandemic that we've been experiencing. And I know Terry and I spent many days praying for those in the eastern area of Africa and western area of India, that the plague would stop, and that what they expected to happen with the eggs that had been laid by the first plague of locusts wouldn't happen. And thank God it wasn't as bad as people had been predicting. The plague of locusts we know, and it's awful. Everything is eaten by locusts. And the boils, the thought, all these things. But this one, the 3 days of darkness, do read it, Exodus 10:21. And it says here, "Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, a darkness to be felt." So Moses stretched out his hand toward heaven, and there was thick darkness in all the land of Egypt for 3 days. And they did not see one another, nor did any rise from his place for 3 days, but all the people of Israel had light where they dwelt. Now this is astonishing, if you think about it, because this is an era when people had artificial light. They had a means of lighting their homes. It wasn't wax candles like our forefathers in England had, but it was oil lamps. They had a means of lighting, or these what they call them, torches. They could light torches to give themselves light. This was an astonishing darkness. It was so dark. It was a darkness to be felt. Now that's a strange expression, but picture in your mind's eye what that would have been like. What kind of darkness could you have that could be felt? It's a very strange expression. You can't feel darkness. You see darkness or the lack of light, and you have to grope around and feel your way. But a darkness that could be felt, it's a very strange expression. And there was thick darkness in all the land of Egypt for 3 days. And nobody left their homes. Nobody moved from where they lived for fear of being lost and not finding their way home again. Nobody moved around. What a strange thing. Thick darkness. Very strange. I suppose the closest our country's ever known is the pea soupers that used to come in the after the Industrial Revolution, when the London was covered with thick smog, and nobody could move around because it was so dense, the smog. But that wasn't dark, it was just grey. The air was filled with particles that made it grey. This is darkness. This is supernatural. This is God doing something incredible. And they didn't leave. No, they did not see one another, nor did any rise from his place for 3 days. But all the people of Israel had light where they dwelt. Now that's another miracle. There's light in the homes and in the places. The area where the Israelites dwelt had light. How strange. How very, very strange. How miraculous, how amazing. And I was thinking of this as a picture of the situation now, actually, in the spiritual realm. That the people who do not know Jesus live in darkness. They have no light to show them the way to live. They have no light to guide them on the right path for their life. All they have is their own resources and the resources of their family and friends. And if all of these don't know Jesus, there is no light to be had. And all of them are groping about like blind men in this world. They live in darkness. It's a graphic picture, but as we meditate on it and we think about it, we can realize just how difficult life is for people without Jesus. Jesus himself said, "I am the light of the world." And he said, this is the judgment. People prefer the darkness rather than the light because their deeds are evil. Because as well as seeing the way, you would also see what you look like. You would see. If these Egyptians could see, they would see each other. They would see if they were properly dressed or not. They would see if they were dirty or not. They would see the way people were living. But they lived in darkness. They didn't see any of those things for 3 days. But our world is in darkness without Jesus. And when you think about that, you can see how it is possible for people to do such dreadful things to other people because they've seared their consciences. Our politically correct faction have tried to brainwash everybody with what they think is the right way to live. And they don't recognize that what we have is light. They think what they have is light. They think their freedom to do what they please when they please without reference to any moral code at all is a good way to live. But it's not. It's not, and disaster will fall upon them sooner or later. They need the light of Jesus. And we have light, miraculously, we have light. We have guidance, we have a path, and we have a light to follow that path. And we need to be really thankful today for the light that we have in our lives. It's an interesting thing, as I was reading this and I read the rest of the verses, it doesn't really indicate that there was much time between this period of 3 days of darkness and the killing of the firstborn. Because it doesn't say that the darkness lifted, but it does say it was only there for 3 days, so I'm sure that it did lift after 3 days. 3 is a very significant number, of course, in the scriptures, and it may well be that that is also a picture, a foretelling of the 3 days of the life of Jesus, the death of Jesus. I don't know. That's an aside. Don't worry about that thought. There's always thoughts coming, aren't there? But think about light and darkness and give thanks for the light we have in our lives. See you tomorrow. Bye.